Hello and welcome. You're watching the Tov Jewish News channel. My name is Michael Vilensky, and my guest today is Mark Zell, chairman of Republicans Overseas here in Israel. Mark, hello.
Hello, Michael.
Mark, so as a chairman of Republicans Overseas, I want you to tell us if there are any latest developments in the Republican race in America. Is Trump still the main candidate? And we all saw that there is an attempt to disqualify him from the presidential race. How is that really going?
Well, first of all, he continues to be the leading candidate for the Republican nomination without any real competitors at this point. In fact, the more that the Democratic administration and Democratic Party try to disqualify him, we can talk about that in a minute, the stronger he gets, both with respect to the public opinion polls and with respect to donors who are contributing large sums to his campaign. His principal contenders at this point, I'd say, are Nikki Haley, the former governor of South Carolina and the former UN ambassador, who's running a strong race against Trump, relatively speaking, in New Hampshire, which is going to hold its primaries in February. The first primaries are going to be held in Iowa, the Iowa caucuses this month. And they right now, Trump enjoys a lead in the polls, but it's very difficult to poll the Iowa caucuses, so we don't really know how that's going to turn out. And but even in Nikki Haley's home state of South Carolina and Governor Ron DeSantis' home state in Florida, Trump has a overweening advantage in the polls at this point. So if I had to guess, I'd say Trump is the nominee. Now, you asked about disqualification. That has been attempted directly in at least two states up to now, Colorado and Maine. And both cases have been appealed directly to the Supreme Court. In fact, I'm familiar with the lawyers in the Colorado case, and Trump recently just filed an appeal against the Maine decision. Both decisions are based on Section 3 of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, which prohibits persons who engage in insurrections against the United States from holding federal office. There are many, many problems with that approach, and most legal commentators, including myself, believe that if the case is reviewed by the Supreme Court, the attempt by the states to disqualify and remove Trump from the ballot, both in the primary elections and in the general election in November this year, will fail and may well be reversed by a unanimous Supreme Court. So, and that'll put an end to this monkey business that the Democrats are attempting to do. The basic problem with the American public is they say, we want to decide who to vote for president. We don't want the courts to intervene or the state secretaries of state to intervene and decide who the candidates are.
So, Mark,
there you go.
I saw a couple of interviews with President Trump, and he keeps repeating the same phrase. He keeps saying that if he were the president, the war in Israel and the war in Ukraine would not happen. How do you see that? Is that really the case? Is Trump the person that would really prevent it from happening?
Yeah, obviously it's speculation. All right, we're talking about a hypothetical situation. But I think he's right. During his 4 years as president, no new wars were started by anyone against the United States or the United States allies. And there's a reason for that. The main reason for that is that people, enemies of the United States, Israel, and the free world, were not sure what the president of the United States would do. He kept them guessing, which is a very effective negotiating tool. I mean, he was even engaging North Korea's madman in direct dialogue during his presidency, and Putin, who invaded Ukraine both during the Obama administration and later in the Obama-Biden administration, or I should say the Biden-Obama administration, which is currently in office, he invaded, without any kind of second thought. And that largely happened because of the debacle in Afghanistan in the summer of 2021. So, and that's typically what's going on with the Biden administration in terms of U.S. foreign policy. It doesn't really have a foreign policy. It reacts to crises as they develop, and that gives the initiative to America's adversaries, whether they be the Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians, the North Koreans, the Venezuelans. They're kind of expanding around the world, and they take the initiative, and the American government belatedly responds, and that is what gives them the advantage and puts America, makes it look weak. When America looks weak, or America's enemies will play.
We can see that the general direction of the Biden administration now towards the war in Israel is that Israel should enter the Palestinian Authority to rule in Gaza. And as we can, every person living in Israel and at least acquainted with the whole situation in Israel knows how corrupt and how radical is the Palestinian Authority. Would you think that under Trump that would not be the case? That Trump would actually, root for Israel ruling in Gaza after the war? And how would the
Well,
Gaza
I can't.
day after look like?
I think it's fairly clear based on the policies that President Trump followed while he was in office that he would not be putting any reliance on the Palestinian Authority, certainly as it's currently constituted, and probably after any kind of so-called reform that the Biden administration keeps talking about. I don't think that's possible in the short term. Remember that when he was president, Trump cut off all American aid, not only to the Palestinian Authority, but also to UNRWA, the United Nations Refugee Welfare Agency for the Palestinians. So they have their own refugee agency. He cut it off. He removed the Americans from the United Nations Human Rights Council. Okay, so there couldn't be a more explicit, unambiguous statement of a Trump foreign policy with respect to Palestinian Authority. Now, what his position would be regarding the day after in Gaza, I think most people who look at the situation understand that the day after in Gaza, the Israeli army must remain in control of the military and security situation there. There's no other alternative at this point. Okay, maybe down the road there might be some kind of a room for an international multilateral force of the sort that exists in the Sinai Peninsula since '73, or since the Yom Kippur War. But I don't think that there's anything like that on the table right now, or that it's feasible. Israel needs to, hopefully it will finish the job in Gaza. We're all praying for that. And when it does so, that the army will remain in control of the physical situation. Now, who needs to run the civil administration in Gaza the day after? It will also be the Israeli army initially, okay? And after that, we can talk about different options for the civil administration for whatever population is going to be left in Gaza. But so I'm not going to second guess President Trump on that. But I can tell you that he has a very, very clear understanding of the realities in this part of the world. That's why he succeeded with the Abraham Accords. Okay, I think we can see if he comes back into office, I hope to see the Abraham Accord, that whole initiative, reinvigorated and expanded to include other nations in the region. He's the guy that can make that happen because the potential partners in an Abraham Accord arrangement respect him and respect his decisiveness and the clarity of thought.
There are many people here in Israel who are afraid that if Trump gets elected in 2024, he won't be as pro-Israel as he was in his last term, because he had said some controversial statements that were or misunderstood or they raised some eyebrows. Let's put it this way here in Israel. How would you think will his support look like if he gets elected now?
Well, okay, I think you're referring to his comment about the Hisbah early after the war started in October. That was a mistake, and I know what he was saying. He was giving credit to the Hezbollah regime, militarily and politically. They are strong. He said that they are strong. They are strong. Israel will acknowledge that. The problem with Trump's statement is it was made at a time immediately after the October 7th massacres, which it just was insensitive, in my view, to the feelings and of the Israeli population here. It should not have been said. Even if it were true, it should not have been said. Okay. Now that we're seeing what's going on the northern border, particularly after this weekend's wholesale barrage by 40 rockets aimed primarily at knocking out our electronic surveillance facility in Har Meron, apparently with some considerable success to our great chagrin. The Trump's comments about the sophistication and power of Hezbollah uh, were were obviously correct. He may say things in a very impolitic and undiplomatic way from time to time, but he's usually right about his observations, concerning geopolitics and domestic politics.
So do you think his support for Israel will not change in 2024? Related also to
I
how
don't see any.
Kushner is not as
I
involved in his administration?
Yeah, I don't see that happening. I mean, look, who knows? But his statements thus far regarding, for example, what Israel should do in the current war against Hamas, I think couldn't be any clearer. He came out very early on and said Israel must destroy Hamas. In fact, all of the three leading Republican candidates are saying that, and that's one reason why voters here in Israel, U.S. voters here in Israel and in the United States would vote Republican in 2024, because the Democrats they have a very different take on the war and their support for Israel. Republicans are solid, including President Trump. I don't see anything that's likely to change in that regard. There are a lot of people talk about, for example, this friction that he had with Prime Minister Netanyahu immediately after Biden's election in 2020, where Prime Minister Netanyahu congratulated Biden. Prime Minister Netanyahu did the correct thing, in my view. I understand that Donald Trump was at that time, struggling to challenge the results of the 2020 election, but that's not something that Prime Minister Netanyahu or any Israeli leader should have been involved with. And so I don't think that's going to have any long-term consequences for U.S.-Israeli relationships under a Trump administration. So I'm very positive about that, and the faster we get Trump elected president, the better it's going to be, not only for us here in Israel, not only for the peoples of the Middle East, but for the world at large. We need strong American leadership. We need to restore that to Washington. Right now, it's just an open invitation to catastrophe. That's what we're witnessing around the world today, sadly.
Mr. Mark Zell, Chairman of Republicans Overseas, thank you very much for your insight on the American politics and for this interview. Thank you also
Thank
to
you,
all
Michael,
of
and
our
I
viewers.
wish you a very good week, a peaceful week, hopefully. We don't want to see any more of our soldiers die. We don't want to see innocent civilians die. We want to see this war over. Hamas and Gaza should either surrender or get the heck out of there, okay? And if they don't, Israel's job there, including, and I want to say just a word of praise for our soldiers, including my son and my son-in-law who are in Khan Yunis as we speak. I hope that they succeed in their mission, and want to see them return home safe and sound as soon as they complete their task. Thank you, Mikhail.
Let's hope for their return in the nearest time possible. Thank you again, Mark, for this interview. Thank you also to all of our viewers that watch this interview. Don't forget to subscribe to us on all of our social media platforms. Thank you again. Have a nice day.